The Witch and the Definitely Dead Detective by Sadie Brent. Chapter 9. Shadows in the Sage. The morning sun sparkled across the dew-laden flowers outside Silver Sage Naturals, giving the garden an almost enchanted shimmer. Evie kneeled in the soil, wearing a pair of borrowed gloves she'd found tucked under the shop counter, and carefully pruned the lavender that had grown wild since Lizzie's passing. The air carried a soft hum of bees flitting from flower to flower, adding a serene rhythm to the stillness of the morning, while the sweet, calming scent floated in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of sage and rosemary still clinging to the shop's walls. As she worked, her fingertips brushed the cool, waxy leaves of sage and the delicate blooms of chamomile. The earthy scents blended with the faint aroma of Lizzie's shop, a heady mix of dried herbs, aged wood, and a lingering whisper of frankincense. "Lizzie, you must have had such a knack for this. You really knew how to make things beautiful," Evie murmured to herself, her voice soft with admiration. "Everything here just feels alive." Spinks lounged nearby on the warm stone step, one paw lazily batting at a trailing vine that had crept too close to the shop. Occasionally, his ears would twitch, and he'd glance toward the shop as if keeping watch for something unseen. "Are you seeing something I'm not, buddy?" Evie asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Spinks purred and batted at the air, his tail twitching in amusement. Evie's peaceful moment was interrupted by a voice, warm but edged with sharp curiosity. "Well, well, good morning, dear. So you're the new Hutchison everyone's been whispering about." Evie looked up to see a tall woman standing on the sidewalk, her silvery hair swept into an elaborate updo that seemed almost theatrical. She wore a flowing caftan adorned with swirling patterns of purple and gold, and around her neck was a pendant that glittered in the sunlight, an ornate pentacle. "Hi there," Evie said, rising to her feet and brushing the dirt from her hands onto her jeans. "You caught me in the middle of some garden therapy." The woman stepped closer, her sharp, bird-like gaze flicking between Evie and the shop. "You must be Lizzie's niece. Well, great niece, I suppose. Everyone's been talking about you. Oh, darling, don't mind me. I'm Mabel Roan. Lizzie and I were acquaintances. You might say we moved in similar circles." "Nice to meet you, Mabel," Evie said, extending a hand. Mabel took it, her grip surprisingly firm for her delicate frame. "I've heard so much about you," Mabel continued, her tone conversational but probing. "Word travels fast here in Stony Fork, you know. People are curious about what you plan to do with Lizzie's legacy." "Well," Evie said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I'm still figuring it all out. The shop means a lot to this community, so I'm hoping to keep it going." Mabel's painted lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and her gaze drifted over the shop, her expression hard to read. "That's a noble goal, but it's good to see someone taking over the place. Of course, it's quite the undertaking. Although Lizzie's shoes are rather big to fill, wouldn't you say?" Evie tilted her head, sensing the subtle challenge in Mabel's words. "I've got a lot to learn, though. Lizzie was so experienced, and I'm, well, new to all of this. It's definitely a challenge, but I'm up for it." "Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out," Mabel said with a tilt of her head. "Lizzie always had a way of making things work, though I imagine it's quite the responsibility to take on." Mabel leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tell me, dear, have you had any unusual experiences in the shop? Lizzie was always dabbling in things beyond the ordinary, if you catch my meaning." Evie hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's definitely unique. Lizzie left behind a lot to explore." "I'm sure she did," Mabel said with a knowing nod. "You know, I run a coven here in town. We focus on spiritual guidance, herbal remedies, and the occasional seance." She smiled slyly. "If you ever need assistance tapping into the shop's energy, I'd be happy to help." "Thanks," Evie said carefully. "I'll keep that in mind." Mabel's gaze lingered on Evie for a moment, as though trying to peel back her thoughts. Then, with a flourish of her caftan, she turned to leave. "Best of luck, dear. And do let me know if you need anything. I'll be keeping an eye on things." As Mabel walked away, Evie felt a strange mix of relief and unease. There was something about the woman's tone, too friendly on the surface, but with a current of something unsaid running beneath. "Spinks," she said to the cat, who had been watching Mabel intently. "Please tell me we don't have to deal with that every day. Guess we've got an audience, huh?" Spinks let out a chirp and trotted inside as if to say, "Get back to work." The interior of Silver Sage Naturals was a treasure trove of sensory delights. Shelves lined the walls, each crammed with jars of dried herbs, vials of fragrant essential oils, and hand-labeled tins of tea blends. There were bottles of homemade lotions and creams, their labels written in Lizzie's elegant handwriting, and bundles of dried lavender and sage hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with a soothing aroma. Evie wandered through the aisles, her fingers brushing over the smooth glass jars and the soft fabric of woven sachets. Lizzie had clearly poured her heart into the shop, and Evie felt a pang of responsibility to honor her memory. She paused at the counter, where a stack of books on herbalism and energy healing waited to be shelved. "Lizzie, you were a busy woman," she murmured. As she moved toward the back room, she felt that familiar, subtle shift in the air. The fine hairs on her arms stood on end. "All right, whoever, or whatever, you are," she said, her voice light. "I'm not scared of you, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't sneak up on me." The room was silent, but Spinks suddenly dashed across the floor, leaping playfully into the air as though chasing an invisible friend. Evie laughed nervously. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" A sudden gust of cool air brushed past her, raising goosebumps on her arms. "Okay then," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "Nice to meet you, too. Great, my cat's playing with ghosts and I'm talking to them. This town is already making me crazy." But despite her words, she felt a strange comfort in the presence she couldn't see. Later that evening, Evie decided to explore the apartment above the shop. The stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed, the faint scent of cedar and rose petals wafting from above. The apartment was small but charming, with its cozy bohemian decor. A vibrant patchwork quilt covered the bed, and the windows were draped with colorful scarves that softened the moonlight streaming in. Books were stacked haphazardly on every available surface, and a vintage record player sat in one corner. Evie's gaze landed on a massive antique roll-top desk near the window. Its dark wood gleamed faintly, and its many small compartments hinted at secrets waiting to be discovered. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Frowning, she searched the room for a key, rifling through drawers and checking beneath cushions, but came up empty. "Of course it's locked," she muttered. Why wouldn't it be? Pulling out her phone, she dialed Marcellus's number. It went to voicemail. "Hi, Marcellus. It's Evie," she said after the tone. "I'm upstairs in the apartment, and there's this amazing roll-top desk, but it's locked. Do you know where the key might be? Or if there's a locksmith in town who could help? Let me know when you get a chance. Thanks." She hung up and stared at the desk. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Spinks hopped onto the desk and batted at the handle, his tail flicking with interest. "Guess we'll have to wait and see," Evie said, scratching behind his ears. As she left the apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that the desk, and whatever it contained, was another piece of the puzzle Lizzie had left behind. Later that evening, as Evie locked up the shop, her mind wandered back to her earlier conversation with Marcellus. His hesitation when discussing Lizzie's death gnawed at her. She was so healthy for her age, she muttered to herself. Heart attack just seems off. Spinks twined around her ankles, letting out a questioning chirp. "Yeah, I know," she said, picking him up. "I'm probably overthinking it, but still." Evie glanced back at the shop, the faint glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. "Something doesn't add up," she whispered. Spinks let out a soft purr, and Evie hugged him close. If Lizzie's death wasn't as natural as it seemed, Evie knew she'd have to figure out why. But for now, she'd take it one step at a time. "Good night, Lizzie," she said, her voice soft. Somewhere in the stillness of the shop, a quiet warmth seemed to answer.